There are moments in life when you experience something you simply can't explain. Something that defies all logic, that makes you question the reality around you. The accounts you're about to hear are exactly that. Real stories submitted by people who have had disturbing experiences while traveling at night. Stories that will make you think twice about driving alone in the wee hours. Our first story comes from Sarah, a 28-year-old bartender working at a bar in a rural area. What happened to her one foggy winter night completely changed her perspective on what's possible or impossible. It was a night like any other. My shift had passed without much happening, and after closing up, I got in my car and started driving home. Most of the way was on winding back roads. Virtually no traffic, few lights, few cars, practically nothing. Just long stretches of curves cutting through forests and farms. Not far from the start of the trip, I remember thinking to myself how strangely foggy it was. I've driven these roads more times than I can count, but that night, visibility was worse than I'd seen it in a long time. I had to slow down and go slower because I could barely see more than a few feet ahead. I was about halfway there when I noticed. Through the fog, perhaps a little to the right of the road, there was this faintly blinking yellow light. At first, I thought it was just some kind of road marker or perhaps a reflector. But as I kept driving, it didn't get any closer or farther away. It just stayed there, blinking steadily, as if it were moving along with me, keeping pace from somewhere deeper in the fog. The whole thing felt a little strange. I couldn't tell how far away she actually was. It was as if the fog was messing with my depth perception. After about a minute of driving with that light flashing in the exact same spot, I started to get a strange feeling in my stomach. I couldn't even explain it to you. Something about it just didn't feel right. I decided to slow down a bit, thinking that maybe if I eased off the accelerator, the light would stay on and I'd have a better idea of what it actually was. But when I slowed to a near stop, the light didn't change at all. It continued blinking at the same steady rate, still maintaining that same lateral distance, as if it were whatever it was that somehow perfectly matched my speed. That's when I really started to get scared. I finally stopped completely just to see if she would do the same. And sure enough, she stood right there, blinking in the exact same spot at the same rate. I sat there for a second trying to figure out what the hell I was looking at and debating whether I should just turn around or keep going. That's when it changed. I tried the ignition again and again. The engine was completely dead. Meanwhile, that flickering yellow light kept burning brighter and brighter and brighter, almost as if it was feeding on something. Not knowing what else to do, I grabbed my phone, figuring maybe I could at least take a video. Just like that, it was gone, as if it had never been there. The fog was still thick, but there was nothing else out there. Just a two-lane road cutting through the open desert under a sky full of stars. It's the kind of trip where you start to feel like the only person left on the planet. I was about an hour away from my next delivery when I first noticed it. I glanced in one of my side mirrors and was a bit surprised to see a dark SUV following me from behind. It wasn't tailgating or anything aggressive. In fact, it was keeping a pretty good distance, but it was definitely following me. No matter how fast or slow I went, it adjusted to match. For nearly 25 miles, it just hovered there in my mirrors. Always visible, always maintaining that same awkward gap. It never tried to speed up or pass. It just stood there behind as if waiting for something. Around 2 a.m., I decided to stop at a small roadside rest area. It wasn't a full-service truck stop or anything like that. Just a dirt parking lot with a few faded spaces and a small shed with a few vending machines. Just a quick nap, an hour or two to recharge before finishing the route in the morning. I took a quick walk around the truck, making sure the cargo doors were still locked and everything was secure, then returned to the cab. I reclined my seat, opened the window slightly to let some air in, and settled in for a bit of a rest. The parking lot was dead silent at this point, and for the first time all night, I actually started to relax. My logic was that even if this person really meant me harm, there was no way they would turn their vehicle around just to continue harassing me. The combination of my exhaustion and newfound comfort made sleep a breeze. If I had to guess, I'd say I fell asleep that night in a matter of minutes. I should probably mention that I'm a very easily awakened person. Like, very easily. You kind of have to be to work in this field. Sleeping in suspicious roadside spots so often develops a third eye, so to speak. Perhaps an hour after falling asleep, as you guessed, I was awakened by the faintest little noise. a soft crunching sound like footsteps pressing on loose gravel. Even though I was still drowsy, I had enough sense to stay still. I opened the corner of one of my window blinds to take a look outside, and sure enough, there were two figures standing near the rear wheels of my trailer. They were crouched down, inspecting the lower locking mechanisms, as if trying to figure out how to open them without making too much noise. They were being pretty quiet, but I noticed one of them had a small flashlight, using it to signal back and forth to the other. I couldn't make out any faces, but it was clear as day what they were doing. I didn't have a weapon with me. I usually don't, but if it came down to it, I was fully prepared to defend my truck and cargo. This is my life. As I watched, one of the guys reached into a small bag and pulled out what looked like pliers. That was it. So, I essentially have free rein to drive however I want. And trust me, I fully enjoy it. My dad's BMW M3 definitely helps in that regard, too. Tonight was one of those times. I was cruising along the highway without a care in the world. The stereo was off and the passenger seat was empty. My ears were focused not on the music, but on two other things: the beautiful sounds of my car and the hiss of the air around my face. Driving like this is one of the only things that makes me feel truly free. I don't know what came over me, but at one point I had this insatiable urge to get off the highway and hit some back roads where I could really appreciate the car's handling. It's like when you have a really strong urge to do something and you don't really know why, but you know you won't be able to sleep at night if you don't satisfy it. So that's exact sound. I walked over to the cart, unsure of what I'd find inside. Groceries, maybe? No, this was ridiculous. I internally scolded myself for even letting such a stupid thought enter my brain. I snorted into the cart and realized it was completely empty, just an ordinary metal shopping cart sitting in the middle of the road. He stared at me with two small, bloodshot eyes. His clothes were torn as if he'd run through thick vegetation or barbed wire, and his hair was messy and wet. His face was smeared with something dark, dirt or blood, or maybe both. He had this disturbing, vacant expression on his face that wasn't quite a grimace, but wasn't quite a smile either. I'd never been more terrified in my entire life. It was bad. Blood was gushing from somewhere on his body, but he didn't seem to care or even notice. He must have realized I wasn't going anywhere because he started fiddling with the door handle, trying to force it open. That's what you did for me. I snapped back to reality, maneuvered the car around the shopping cart, and sped out of there. I was beyond conflicted the entire ride home. Not only was I still shaken and scared, but part of me also felt like this person needed help for their injuries and wasn't going to get it. I debated going back to see if he needed help, but ultimately decided against it. Instead, I reported the incident to the police while still driving. They said they'd send someone to the location I described to investigate. When I finally got home, I parked in the driveway and got out to inspect the car. I needed to know how bad the damage was. That's when I noticed blood splattered all over the passenger side door. Much more than I expected. It was streaked across the side mirror, rubbed against the door handle, and even dotted part of the rear quarter panel. There was also a slight dent near the center of the door, barely noticeable if you weren't looking for it. The amount of blood, however, was what really affected me. It was much more than I would have thought from that brief impact. It was an inhuman amount of blood. The next morning, my dad took one look at the car and completely lost it. He didn't even give me a chance to explain before he started unloading, yelling about how irresponsible I was, how I should never have taken the car out so late, and how much it would cost to fix the paint and the dent. I kept trying to tell him it wasn't my fault, that something happened out there that I couldn't have foreseen, but he wasn't having it. To him, all he saw was his car covered in blood with a dented door, and that was enough. Fourth story. Our fourth and final story takes us to the mountain roads of Colorado, where Emma, a 31-year-old nurse, has discovered that sometimes the road less traveled can be a path to pure terror. I was returning from a medical conference in Denver, driving through the Colorado mountains on a particularly cold October night. It was around 11:30 p.m., and I had decided to take the scenic route home, a decision that haunts me to this day. When I finally arrived home at 2 a.m., I carefully inspected my entire car. There was no damage, no evidence that anything had happened. Over the next few days, I researched that particular road online and discovered several similar stories from other drivers. Reports of ghostly figures, apparitions in white dresses, and unexplained encounters on the exact same section of road where I had my experience. Apparently, that area has had several fatal accidents over the years, including a particular tragedy in 1987 where a bride on her way to her wedding lost control on a curve and fell off the cliff. Her body was never found due to the depth of the canyon and the dangerous conditions for rescuers. It is said that she still wears the white wedding dress she was wearing that night. I've never taken that road again since. And honestly, I don't recommend anyone do alone late at night again. And Emma completely changed her route home, preferring to add 2 hours to her trip rather than face that haunted road again. The truth is, there are things in this world that we simply cannot explain. Phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality. Experiences that make us question everything we thought we knew about what is possible. Perhaps they are just elaborate coincidences, tricks of the weary mind, or illusions created by darkness and fear. Or maybe, just maybe, there are forces in this world that are far greater and stranger than our current science can explain. The next time you're driving alone at night, pay attention to your surroundings. Look beyond the headlights, listen beyond the roar of the engine. And remember, not all roads lead simply from one place to another. Some lead to experiences that will forever change how you see the world around you. If you've had a similar experience or know someone who has, share your story in the comments. Maybe your experience can help someone understand that they're not alone in what they've experienced. And remember, keep your eyes on the road, but don't forget to check your mirrors. You never know what might be following you. It took a while, but eventually 2 officers showed up and helped me inspect the truck. Sure enough, there were fresh pry marks along one of the lower lock arms at the back of my trailer, right where those guys had been messing around. Fortunately, they couldn't open it. The officers told me they'd seen this kind of thing before. Cargo thieves. Apparently, it's much more common along that corridor than most people realize. Our third story comes from Jake, a 22-year-old who learned the hard way that not all back roads are safe for a carefree nighttime stroll. There's nothing better than a nighttime drive, especially in the summer. Picture this: the warm summer breeze flowing through the open windows of a speeding car, cutting through endless stretches of empty highway. Well, that's how it is in my area. Anyway, there aren't many cars on the highway at night, nor are there any police officers. So, I essentially have free rein to drive however I want. And trust me, I fully enjoy it. My dad's BMW M3 definitely helps in that regard, too. I let the car open up a bit, taking the curves fast enough to feel the tires grip and release. The streets were completely deserted. It was just me, the car, and the road. That was until I spotted a flash of light on the road ahead and slammed on the brakes just in time to narrowly avoid hitting it. Once I stopped, I finally had a clear view of what I'd almost hit. It was a shopping cart just sitting there in the middle of the road, as if someone had pushed it out and left it. The way my headlights bounced off the metal bars must have been what caught my attention, making it seem much more sudden and dramatic than it actually was. Still, it caught me completely off guard. I mean, it's not exactly normal to find a random shopping cart sitting right in the middle of a country road close to midnight. Against my better judgment, I put the car in park, turned on my hazard lights, and got out to take a closer look. I'd never been more terrified in my entire life. It was bad. Blood was gushing from somewhere on his body, but he didn't seem to care or even notice. He must have realized I wasn't going anywhere because he started fiddling with the door handle, trying to force it open. That's what you did for me. I snapped back to reality, maneuvered the car around the shopping cart, and sped out of there. I was beyond conflicted the entire ride home. Not only was I still shaken and scared, but part of me also felt like this person needed help for their injuries and wasn't going to get it. I debated going back to see if he needed help, but ultimately decided against it. Instead, I reported the incident to the police while still driving. They said they'd send someone to the road. My heart began to race. Who would stand still in the middle of a dangerous mountain road in the middle of the night? I came to a complete stop about 30 meters away and turned on my high beams to get a better look. What I saw made me question my own sanity. It was a woman wearing what appeared to be a flowing white dress, but there was something profoundly wrong with the entire image. She stood perfectly still, almost rigid, with her arms hanging naturally at her sides. Her hair was loose and seemed to move slightly in the breeze, but her body remained statuesque. Mountains can create all sorts of strange visual phenomena. I decided to try to carefully skirt around the figure. The road was narrow, but there was enough room to pass if I drove slowly and got close to the edge of the mountain. As I began to move forward very slowly, the figure began to move too. Not walking or running, gliding. Literally gliding across the asphalt without any visible movement of its legs, perfectly blocking my path as I tried to pass. I immediately slammed on the brakes and put the car in reverse. As I began to back up, the figure moved again, this time sliding backward in perfect sync with me, always maintaining that same eerily precise distance. It was at this point that panic truly set in. This wasn't human. Humans don't move like that. Humans don't glide across the ground while maintaining a perfectly rigid posture. I shifted back into first gear and accelerated directly toward the figure, half expecting it to move or disappear, proving it to be some kind of illusion. But as my car passed where she should have been, I felt no impact. I glanced in the rearview mirror and she had completely disappeared, as if she had never existed. I drove the rest of the way home with my hands gripping the steering wheel, constantly checking every mirror. When I finally arrived home at 2 a.m., I carefully inspected my entire car. There was no damage, no evidence that anything had happened. Over the next few days, I researched that particular road online and discovered several similar stories from other drivers. Reports of ghostly figures, apparitions in white dresses, and unexplained encounters on the exact same section of road where I had my experience. Jake still has nightmares about bloodshot eyes and never drives alone late at night again. And Emma completely changed her route home, preferring to add 2 hours to her trip rather than face that haunted road again. The truth is, there are things in this world that we simply cannot explain. Phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality. Experiences that make us question everything we thought we knew about what is possible. Perhaps they are just elaborate coincidences, tricks of the weary mind, or illusions created by darkness and fear. Or maybe, just maybe, there are forces in this world that are far greater and stranger than our current science can explain. The next time you're driving alone at night, pay attention to your surroundings. Look beyond the headlights, listen beyond the roar of the engine. And remember, not all roads lead simply from one place to another. Some lead to experiences that will forever change how you see the world around you.